welcome to the end of the first week in June. Today on our show, we'll enter the fascinating world of mountain men right here in Denton, Texas. And also, for the terminally ill, there's a place to turn for help, Ann's A Haven Hospice. All this and much more, but first a word from one of our sponsors, the people who make a fashion statement in Denton, Russell's. Can you picture yourself spending weekends in the woods with no electricity and no material possession dating before 1840? I can't, but maybe you can. Our next guest surely can, because he's the co-founder of a Rangers Skinner Club here in Denton, and he happens to be a real mountain man of the modern century. His name, Bob Welton. Bob, welcome to Denton today.
Thank you.
What's the modern-day version of the old mountain man?
We try to recreate the camps and the rendezvous of the mountain men of old during the fur trapping era of the 1820s, 1830s. And when we go out on these rendezvous and campouts, as you said, everything that we take with us has to be a replica or an original pre-1840 item.
Until I met you, I didn't even know mountain men existed in this society. How popular is it nationally?
It's quite popular. There are clubs in every city that I'm aware of in the United States. East Coast, up in Canada, all over. There are large mountain men organizations all over the United States.
What about the Metroplex area specifically?
I have absolutely no idea how many clubs are there, but I know there are well over 5.
I bet. And the term trapper, how does that relate to mountain man?
Back in the early 1800s, beaver fur was used to make coats and hats. And the mountain men would literally go up into the mountains and trap beaver and tan out the hides, and then go to a rendezvous once a year and trade the hides for staples, sugar, salt, powder, shot, things like, and trade goods for the Indians.
That's interesting. Well, how did this all start for you? How long ago, and what was the fascination?
Well, I'd heard about it up as far back as 15 years ago, but had never had a chance to go on a rendezvous. And a little over a year ago, I went on my first one through some people I met here in town and fell in love with it and got into it full time.
Stop right there. What does the word rendezvous mean?
That was when people came from like St. Louis with all kinds of trade goods, and all of the mountain men in a general area would get together with this person and trade their beaver pelts for the staples that they needed. So that was their money at that time.
You're telling me that's actually what you do on a weekend?
Well, we do trading. We can't trap beaver anymore, but we do trading. Everyone takes what they call a trade blanket and lays out things that they make or things that they have bought. And all weekend is shooting and swapping and telling yarns. Telling yarns.
Women, are they as involved in this as men?
Oh, most definitely. Some of them more so. It's a complete family situation. The clubs are very family-oriented, even the small children.
I know the sons must love it. Boys like the outdoors.
They love it, and my daughter likes it.
What do women trade?
Bead work, hand-done quill work. They sew up some of the clothing and trade clothing. A lot of them are into shooting themselves, and they trade guns and make powder horns, all kinds of things.
Well, let's show our audience a national magazine, and on the cover of this is Bill Golden. Who's Bill Golden, Bob?
Bill Golden sings with the Oak Ridge Boys, and he's been a mountain man. As a matter of fact, belongs to the most exclusive mountain man club in the United States called Mountain Men of America. That's an invitation-only club. And in front of his mansion that he has, I believe it's in Tennessee, he has a large Indian-style teepee. And he spends a lot of his time actually sleeping in a teepee instead of in his house.
And this is a true yarn.
Yeah, that's a true story.
Isn't story and yarn the same thing?
Well, yarn is embellished a little bit.
A tall tale.
That's correct.
And being a Texan, I bet you have a lot of tall tales.
Everybody does.
I bet. What's a typical rendezvous weekend for you people?
We normally leave on either a Thursday evening or a Friday morning and go out and set up our camp. And during the weekend, it normally lasts 3 days. We come home on a Sunday afternoon. And during the weekend, there's trading, visiting with friends that you may not have seen since the last rendezvous a couple of months before, shooting contests with rifle and pistol, tomahawk throwing contests, knife throwing contests, fire starting contests with flint and steel, A lot of times we have a bake-off contest of blueberry cobbler or biscuits or something like this. It's just filled with contests and visiting and having fun.
Well, you know, there's more to it than that, because little boys and girls growing up don't have the chance in our society to really experience the mountain man concept and how hard it was for them, and how much work in building and making things with their hands. So wouldn't you say that it's a great educational process for a child?
It's a great, absolutely great educational process. My 7-year-old boy loves it, and he is learning how to make bows and arrows on his own, and he helps around the camp with cooking and gathering the firewood, and he's learning about nature itself, what kind of, how to stay away from poison ivy, how to recognize it, things like this, that a lot of kids don't get a chance to do anymore.
Now, I'm a woman. What would a woman do on a weekend like that? How would I compete?
You can compete in any way that a man would compete. You can shoot rifle, pistol, throw tomahawk or knife, get in a fire starting contest.
Are there lessons to learn all this? I don't know all this right now.
No, someone who is brand new that comes into the club is taken under the wing of the club. Everyone will give them pointers on how to load the rifle, how to shoot the rifle, how to throw the hawk. A lot of camaraderie.
That's great.
Etc.
What about bake-offs? Do women compete in cooking, let's say?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Like I said, the biscuits in the Dutch oven over an open fire, baking pies over an open campfire. So,
well, you know, you have to find the land that you go, and then you have to dig holes to cook and do the various things. How do you find landowners that will let you mutilate their land, so to speak?
This has become a problem in the past because of some hunters or something like that who would go on land unannounced, uninvited. We do have some people, a lot of us here in the Denton area know ranchers and farmers in the area, and we approach them to be able to use a piece of their land for a weekend. And when we leave, the land is really not mutilated. We fill the holes back in and tamp the ground back down, and when we dig the immediate hole, we save what's on top as the grass and put it to the side. After we've got it filled back up, well, then we tamp the grass back down in, and in about 2 weeks period of time, you don't even know we've been there.
That's interesting. Bob, there are a lot of game laws that prevent us from killing animals. What do you do for food?
We take modern day food with us. The one modern item that they will let us have is an ice chest. However, it has to be kept covered and out of sight at all times.
I would imagine no glass containers.
No glass containers.
To drink out of.
No, we drink out of tin cups or earthenware mugs. And same thing with our eating utensils, our tin plates and or earthenware plates. I lost my train of thought.
Okay, what about cigarettes for those who smoke? What do you smoke? Because you can't have the modern day cigarette.
This is correct. Most of the men who smoke will smoke a pipe that was made back in that era. This one was made out of bone and deer antler.
Just hold that up for a minute. Maybe our camera can pick that up. That's beautiful.
This was hand carved by a gentleman who does this for a living and goes to rendezvous, just makes pipes. A lot of the people will roll their own cigarette or chew tobacco. If you're in the privacy of your own tent, you can smoke a tailor-made, but they don't want you walking around camp with it. And then when you are done with a cigarette butt, it has to be discarded either in a campfire, or you'll take your knife and dig a small hole and put it in the ground and cover it back up, so that we try and keep the landscape just as nice as it was before we walked in.
Now I'm thinking of something else. With no electricity, what about bathroom facilities?
We have primitive type bathroom facilities, normally 4 or 5 around the camp, and they are private. They are shaded inside a tent. But it's just like the outhouses years ago.
How did men survive? What did they use before the 1840s to, survive in the wild?
The biggest thing they used to survive was their brain and experience. They carried black powder rifles and pistols, which are one shot at a time. They carried knives, tomahawks.
All kinds of things.
Yes.
Well, Bob, we're going to be joined in a few minutes by several mountain people, let's say. They're going to show us some special clothing that they wear. But first, a word from 2 of our special sponsors. We'll be right back. We're back with Bob Welton, one of Denton's mountain men. Bob, you would like to show us some of the special clothing that is worn on these weekend rendezvous. Let's call in two of your special people here.
Okay.
Come right in.
This is Tom Carlton and Cindy Welton.
Hi, Tom and Cindy. Cindy's your daughter.
Cindy is my daughter. Tom is my future son-in-law.
Good, okay.
And they are with the Ranger Spring Skinners. As a matter of fact, they're both officers in the club. Cindy is wearing a two-piece Plains Indian-style dress in gray cloth embroidered. It's fringed. She has on white deerskin moccasins and leggings. A lot of times you'll see these dresses made out of leather, but they were also made out of trade cloth and adorned with embroidery, beads, colored porcupine quills, and fringe, bells, things like this, anything that they could find to adorn them with. So clothing at the time was just as common, if not more common, than the leather clothing that everyone thinks of when they think mountain men. Tom has on a calico shirt, which is drop shoulder, a pair of brown corduroy pants, and corduroy was popular in that era. Back then it was called the King's Cord because the King of England used it for some of his soldiers. A pair of knee-high Apache boots. He's holding a .54 caliber Hawken rifle, which was very popular in the mountains at that time, and has a .45 caliber Kentucky pistol and a .50 caliber mountain pistol, throwing knife, and of course his possibles bag where he keeps his shot and patching, and a powder horn. These are the way that most of the men dressed and carried their equipment on the trail, let alone at the rendezvous.
Is this how they actually dress for a weekend?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So this is all authentic. This is not just for today's show.
No, this is all authentic. These are the clothes that we wear on the weekend rendezvous.
What about the smaller children?
They,
the younger children, do they also try to adhere to the attire?
Oh, yes. Everyone in camp is required to dress in a pre-1840 type clothing.
That's great. Now, next to me here, we've got some, what is it?
Those are tomahawks.
Tomahawks. Okay, and just explain a little bit about its use.
Okay. This was very useful. They adopted this from the Indians. And this particular one was used like a trade hawk. They would trade to the Indians. It's used around camp for chopping wood, gathering firewood, driving your tent stakes.
A lot of versatile use with that weapon.
Plus it's also a throwing hawk. Mm-hmm. And we throw at targets and have competitions.
Mm-hmm. With competitions, is there anything to be won?
Oh yes, we have quite a few things. We always have a large prize blanket, and they have an aggregate, which means you enter all of the contests, and the person with the highest score will get, of course, the top prize. And a lot of times they give away rifles, tomahawks, powder horns.
So if there's something you need and you've got your eye on, you can get it at a weekend rendezvous.
You can buy one there, or if you're lucky enough or good enough, you can win one there, yes.
That's great. And the women the same. They have their own things to trade.
The women can join the competition with the men, but we also have a separate category for women, including aggregate and prizes.
You know, it's real interesting how I met you. I had your wife on the show, and she's Joyce Welton, and she's a certified massage therapist. And little did I know there was another celebrity in that family, and we're just so glad that we have you. You know, I think I'd need a massage from Joyce if I went on one of those weekend rendezvous and had to sleep in a tent on the ground. I mean, you think nothing of it, but unless I have a soft mattress, I'm just totally out of context.
Well, you'd be surprised really how soft the ground is when you're really tired and you've spent all day long out there really having fun.
What's the expression when you've had a real tough weekend?
A real tough weekend?
Yeah, you're as tired as something. There's an old mountain man expression about how tired you are. Does that come to mind?
No, it does not. I'm sorry.
There's so many of them. You have a language all your own, don't you?
Yes, ma'am.
You have expressions and terms and...
Yes, ma'am, we do. One of the terms that is used more than anything is shining, and that means that it's really good. So if you have a shining time on a rendezvous, it means you had an excellent time out there.
Well, we had an excellent time today having you on our show and enlightening us about the real mountain men of Denton. Thanks for coming.
Okay, thank you.
No matter what your lifestyle is, the Denton Record Chronicle has it all for you. We'll be right back. The unknown is what most people fear about death. Ann's Haven Hospice takes people in their last 6 months of life and teaches them how to die gracefully. We have the director of Ann's Hospice with us, Adrian Anderson. Adrian, welcome to Denton today.
Thank you, Mary.
Such a wonderful health group organization. How did it all start?
Well, it began with the death of Ann Lockwood, in whose memory and honor Ann's Haven is founded. And because of her special kind of personality and her ability to be very open with people about her own dying process, she really became the first person in Denton County to receive hospice services on an informal basis. And after her death, her husband, Dr. Robert Lockwood, formed a death and dying study group at St. Barnabas Church here in Denton. And that group met for a few months and found out about the formal hospice concept. And some members of that group went to New Haven to the first hospice in the United States, which began in 1973. And then by 1979, Denton had applied for a certificate of need for their own hospice program. And Ann's Haven's first office was in the First United Methodist Church here in Denton and began as a completely volunteer organization. And now we have become a business since that time, and all of our nurses are paid, although a lot of our program is conducted by volunteers.
You know, it's amazing, but last year alone, you had over 300 patients, not to mention 500 individuals that were under your service. Is that correct?
Well, we had over 300 patient family members because we consider our patients and our families as all under our care, because we provide not only services for the patient, but we assist the family in caring for the patient and follow the family in bereavement after the death.
A total family.
Uh-huh.
After a patient dies, how long would you help the family?
We work with the family for at least a year following the death with our bereavement program. Our social worker, within the first 2 weeks following the death, she makes a home visit and talks to the family. And then she comes back to our team meeting, which we have once a week, and we discuss what the individual members of that family are going to need from us as a hospice. And sometimes that includes individual counseling, but most often it just includes inclusion in our bereavement groups, which meet on a monthly basis. And we also have our volunteers follow up with bereavement phone calls to the family members, and we try to call at significant times for the family, like on the date of the patient's birthday, or the anniversary date of the death, or the wedding anniversary date, which will be like the first wedding anniversary that the two people aren't together. And we try to continue to follow the family. We always follow them for at least a year, and we find that sometimes people require services for as long as 2 years, especially when there are young children involved.
Your service is needed even more so after the death of that person then, because of the family and their grief, let's say.
That's true, that they need our supportive services more at that time. Then, of course, they don't have the need for the skilled nursing services and the other direct medical care that we provide for the patient.
What is the role of director? Exactly what do you do?
Well, my role not only is to see that the direct patient care is taken care of and that the family and patient's needs are met, but we also have an auxiliary which raises money for Ann's Haven and also participates in educational events about our program. I work with the auxiliary. We have a very active board of directors, and I work with them. So my overall responsibility is to see that we raise the money necessary to provide our services, and that we provide those services well and meet the needs of the patients in Denton County.
Adrian, when did your interest begin in this group?
Well, I became interested at the very beginning and attended some of the death and dying study groups. Then later I functioned kind of as a volunteer for Ann's Haven, but I became involved professionally in hospice in 1982 or 1983 when I was hired by the Hunt Foundation to write a study on inpatient hospice care in the United States, and they flew me around the country to tour inpatient hospice units, and I worked with a couple of the hospices in Dallas. And then Ann's Haven lost their original director and invited me to work with them, and I'm from Denton, and so I was pleased to be doing this in my hometown.
Well, it's a special job.
Oh, it is. It's a very special job. It's very rewarding. The question most commonly asked in a social kind of context is, isn't your job depressing?
Mm-hmm.
And my job isn't depressing. My job is very rewarding. What we do is very sad, and sometimes we cry with our families, but what we do is not depressing because we have so much to offer the patient and the family in relation to keeping the patient, to help them die with dignity, to be pain-free, and to help the family and the patient come to terms with the death. So the job itself is very rewarding.
In doing research for this segment this morning, I did read, though, of several staff nurses who become depressed during, you know, the close contact they have with these terminally ill patients,
Yes.
and how they overcome that, and how it's so rewarding that they continue to do it, and they try to maintain that distance, even though it's hard because they are
Right.
human. But they do all experience that to some degree. It's just like being a nurse in a hospital. You experience life and death and disease and emergency, and you have to just maintain a stable personality to uphold
Right.
this pressures and the stress. Somebody has to do it. It's a
Right.
need that is greatly, you know, needed in our area.
And that is the key to the reason that we work as a team, because what we do is hard to do. We become very close to the patients. We are asking our nurses to do very state-of-the-art nursing care in the home, things that normally are thought of in the hospital setting. The nurse is out there by herself doing what needs to be done in crisis situations, and we work as a team. We work once a week. We meet and discuss every one of our patients and their families and give the nurses the support that they need to continue doing what they're doing. And then we also have various staff support activities where we just come together and talk about the stress of the work that we do. And we think that's a very important component of what we do.
You also have a very outstanding board of directors. Bill Utter, Fred Patterson, just to name a few, are really
Right.
doing a lot in the community. I know there's been a recent fundraiser for
Right.
Ann's Hospice. Tell us about that.
Well, we're right in the middle of the first fund drive that Ann's Haven has ever had, and we've been very grateful to the response to our services here in Denton. Homer Bly, the president of First State Bank, is the campaign chairman of that drive, and he has worked with Carol Short, Roy Appleton, Bill Utter, Jack Miller, and Roy Appleton to bring all of this together for Ann's Haven, because we depend upon community donations to provide our services. 58% of our budget comes from the Denton community, and we serve Denton County, and we depend on Denton County to continue to provide our services.
Speaking of services and providing, does Medicare or Medicaid cover your services?
Yes, Medicare, Medicaid, most group insurance policies do have a hospice benefit, and when that is available, then we build those sources.
What are the various funding organizations that keep you going, such as United Way?
United Way of Louisville and Denton provide 18% of our budget, and that plus the community donations and the Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance make up our total budget.
Well, Adrian, thanks for being on our show and enlightening
thank
us.
you.
And where can our audience call for Ann's Haven Hospice?
Our number is area code 817-566-6550, and we're located at the Evers Bly House at 217 East Oak.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now a word from the people who make grocery shopping a pleasure rather than a chore. Skaggs. We'll be right back. This wraps it up for a Friday on Denton Today. Next week, we have everything from ESP to wines to a baby show from Russell's. Also, you'll learn what happens when you lose your hair. You buy a toupee. All this and much more next week. But for today, this is Mary West saying, you make a difference in Denton. Keep smiling, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.